Welcome to Coastal Matters. I'm Charlie Walters. My guest today is Master Chief Christopher Swiatek of the United States Coast Guard. He is stationed at Brant Point, and he's here to tell us what goes on down there. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you, Charlie. Pleasure to be here.
Let's start with your rank. What does it mean to be a Master Chief in the United States Coast Guard?
Okay, well, I'm the rank of E9. I'm a Master Chief. It's the highest rank you can go in the enlisted rankings. There is one E10 in the Coast Guard, but there's only one. He's the Master Chief Petty Officer of the Coast Guard. So I've kind of reached my pinnacle unless I decide to go down that path. But it's 24 years I've been in the Coast Guard. It's something I've strived to achieve throughout my career. So I'm very happy to be at that rank.
Now, does the officer in charge of this station have to be a Master Chief, or can he or she be a different rank?
Well, it was a Senior Chief billet, which was an E8 up until recently. Just when I took over the job, they made it an E9 billet. So right now, you will have to be an E9 to take over as officer in charge.
And how many men and women are down at the station?
Well, right now we have a personal allowance list of 25 people at the station. Currently, we're a little understaffed. We're waiting on transfers to come in. Every summer, we have a huge transitional period where people are rotating out, people are rotating in. So right now we have about 18, and we're waiting on 4 members to arrive.
And that number is pretty much the same summer or winter, which is surprising to me.
It is. We don't get an extra complement of personnel in the summer, so we just kind of have to make do with what we have. But we've developed a training program where we're able to sustain that level of qualifications, certifications, so that we can keep that throughout the summer or the winter.
So what sorts of things are the men and women doing, say, in January that they are not doing in July or August?
Well, primarily in the winter months, we focus more on training and maintaining of our equipment. We do a lot of training in the summer. We obviously have to maintain our boats and our equipment, but our focus is really on operations in the summer months, is just going out there and doing the search and rescue, doing the recreational boating safety, the law enforcement. So in the winter months, we have a little time off. As I've heard several times that it's very busy in the summer. So
now, this is going to be your first summer.
This is my first summer on the island, and I keep hearing it's going to be difficult. But that's something that the crew, a lot of the crew, there's a lot of continuity from carryover from last year and the year before. Some members have been there up to 5 years at the unit, so I'm kind of relying on them to help guide me through the summer months. But we are able to we have a 24/7, 365 response. And that's our level of our expertise, is that we try to maintain that search and rescue response all the time.
Are you allowed to go on leave from Nantucket in July and August?
I can go on leave. I have my executive petty officer, which is the second in command of the unit, and if I go on leave, he'll just assume my role as acting officer in charge. And my XPO, I'm very fortunate. He's been here. This is his second tour in Nantucket. So he did 4 years here, and then he had a 2-year break where he went to Puerto Rico, and then now he's been here for 4 years. So he's got a lot of experience here in Nantucket.
And he knows where to go if he's been to Puerto Rico and Nantucket.
He does.
Now, when you're on leave, are you really on leave, or can you be called back in the middle of a leave?
Generally, I am on leave, but I'm usually attached to my phone either way. A lot of things come up where I may have to deal with. I try to detach from the unit as much as possible because it's really good, to just have that downtime. But there's certain things that I've found over time when you take leave as officer in charge. If you don't handle things when you're on leave and you get back, it's just piled up, and then you become blocked up for the next month or two. So I do go on leave, but I'm usually still working at the unit, so to speak.
How many vessels do you have at the station?
We have 3 boats right now. We have 2 47 motor lifeboats, and those are our primary search and rescue asset in heavy seas.
And 47 signifies?
That's the length of the vessel, 47-foot motor lifeboat. And the motor lifeboats are designed to roll over. Obviously, we don't want to do that, but they're designed to operate in heavy seas. So those are our primary heavy weather rescue boats. They're fully equipped. They're really the best search and rescue asset we can use out here. We do have a 29-foot response boat with an orange collar around the side and a cabin on it. And that's generally, I don't want to say shallow water response boat, but it's for cases where we may have to go in shallower water than we can reach with the motor lifeboat.
Just this week in the news, there was a car found on Cove 2 where the East Jetty meets Cove 2. And the Coast Guard was involved in trying to find out whose car it was. But in the story I read in the paper, it mentioned a boat going ashore. Is that one of the boats you just mentioned?
That was not our boat. That was
not
actually
your-
the harbor master, Sheila Lucy. They have a boat with wheels actually that they use. They can actually come out of the water. Has 3 wheels on it, and then they can roll to the on the beach, over the sand, then back in the water, and they can check the vessel.
Now, in years past, the Brant Point Station had a duck. In fact, it might have had 2 ducks at one point. This was some time ago.
Is that right? I'm not familiar with that at all.
Okay, and there was something called a lark as well.
A lark. Honestly,
Another kind of an amphibious vehicle / vessel.
I'm not familiar with that at all. I actually didn't even know the Coast Guard had those.
Really?
Really?
Well, I guess they're not needed then. 3 vessels right now. Does that change from time to time for whatever reason?
It doesn't change. Well, I shouldn't say that. There are periods of maintenance where, for example, right now we only have 1 motor lifeboat at the unit. Our primary command is Sector Woods Hole, over in Woods Hole on the Cape. So the motor lifeboat had to have some engineering things done to it, so we took it over to the Cape about a week ago. It'll be there for about a week, just getting maintenance done, and then we'll send a crew over to pick it up next week.
Now, is that the nearest station to Nantucket? Woods
It's not,
Hole?
it's not the nearest station. It's the nearest station would be Menemsha on Martha's Vineyard,
Yeah.
and then Chatham, probably pretty close to equal distance away. But Sector Woods Hole is our main unit where we get our maintenance done. That's our main headquarters.
So if you need help for some reason, if you needed another vessel over here for whatever reason it was, it's likely to come from Woods Hole or possibly Menemsha?
It would probably come from Menemsha or Chatham.
Where do you live down here? Where does the Coast Guard live down here?
Where do we live? I'm
On
sorry.
the island. What part of the island? You don't live at the station.
Okay, I gotcha.
Or maybe some of you do live at the station.
Are you talking about as far as like personal living? I'm sorry, I don't.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, reside.
Okay, gotcha.
Where do the men and women reside on Nantucket?
Okay, we have 2 housing areas on Nantucket. One is Gwen Village, which is across from the hospital. Our second housing area is over in Sconset, where the old Loran Station used to be. The Loran Station was shut down quite a while ago, and so we kind of split people up. There's 2 housing projects getting done on both those facilities to improve them. So we're going to be moving people around quite a bit in the next couple of years, depending on where the construction is going to take place. But some other people actually live on the economy. They live out in certain areas in Nantucket.
When most people think of the Coast Guard, they think of somebody, men and women on a vessel going out to rescue somebody off of a sailboat or wherever it happens to be. Mm-hmm. When that sort of thing isn't happening, and when you're not training, what else might you be doing?
Okay, well, again, generally we're training, generally doing maintenance on the boats, but there is downtime for the crew. They do have time where they can, sit and watch TV. There's time where they'll play video games. A lot of them will be standing watch. We'll always have a watchstander up in the communications center. Some will be standing watch. They'll be eating. They'll just be relaxing, enjoying their time. We try to get a lot of downtime for them because if we do get that case in the middle of the night, say 1, 2 in the morning, and they have to go, they definitely want to be well rested so we don't have fatigue issues.
Now, you've been here 8 or 9 months. Tell us some of the things you've had to do and the station in general has had to do. What parts of the island have you sent vessels to, and what have you done there for whatever reason?
Generally, we've had cases in the Sound. We've had cases inside the harbor. We've had a couple cases completely south of the island. For example, just yesterday we had a case 25 miles southeast of the island. We had a sailboater who was sailing from Puerto Rico to Portland, Maine, with a planned stop in Nantucket. And over time, he ran out of food, he ran out of water, he had several medical issues. So there was about an 8-hour case where we had to send our motor lifeboat down there. It made more sense for us to tow him back to Nantucket because it was very hard for him. He was dehydrated. So that was a pretty extensive haul for the crew, and it was very low visibility. There were times where they couldn't see the bow of the vessel, of our own vessel. So pretty treacherous. A lot of shoals down that area, so they did a really good job.
Now, you mentioned the size of the 3 boats you have here right now. In Nantucket Harbor, there'll be plenty of spots where those boats are going to be too big. And the same thing would happen in parts of Nantucket Harbor. Then what happens?
I'm sorry, did you say if the boats are too big?
If the Coast Guard boat is too big, if the water is too shallow in place X in Nantucket Harbor or Nantucket Harbor, then what happens?
Okay, I'm glad you brought that up. So our 29-foot response boat right now, the minimum depth we can go in is about 3 foot of water. And that may seem like a shallow draft. However, to get in 3 foot of water, we have to trim the engines up. And when you trim the engines up, you actually lose a lot of maneuverability of the vessel. So after arriving here, I realized the need for a shallow water rescue boat. I submitted a request through headquarters. It's finally on the desk at headquarters. The boat has been shipped with Chatham's boat. Chatham also requested a shallow water response boat. And the boat is actually in Chatham right now waiting to come to Brant Point. It's going to replace our 29-foot response boat, and that boat can get into 18 inches of water. Also with the ability to beach if we have to pull someone, medevac them off a beach. So our response on Nantucket is going to be improved by almost 50% as far as the cases we can respond to. In the research I did to try to justify getting the boat, working with the harbor master, Sheila Lucy, we found out that for the last 3 years, 50% of our cases we couldn't respond to, she had to respond to because of the shallow water involved. So this boat is going to be a tremendous asset. It's going to make the efficiency of the station tremendous in areas of search and rescue around the island.
Now, whose decision was it to have that boat be able to come to Nantucket?
Well, it ultimately has to go through the chain of command. It goes through our sector in Woods Hole, then it goes to District 1 in Boston, and then it goes to headquarters in Washington, D.C. So there's
It's a long process.
It's a long process, but believe it or not, and it even surprised me how quickly we were able to get approval on this. From the initial submission of paperwork, about 2 months.
Now, when you say the district, what area does the district cover?
Okay, so District 1 in Boston covers all of Maine all the way down to New Jersey. They cover every Coast Guard station.
So that's a huge area.
It's a very, very large area, including Burlington, Vermont, for example, falls under them. So it's a pretty
Because
large...
of the lake.
Because of the lake. So very, very large area that District 1 covers.
And rivers, I assume, depending
And all
on
the inland
size,
rivers.
the major ones.
Correct.
Do you do patrols as well as rescues? I mean, are you just the same way a cop on the beat? Is there a Coast Guard boat on the beat, so to speak?
We do. We make random patrols, and we try to figure out and target where the busiest times of vessel traffic will be. Obviously, certain times of the year, Memorial Day weekend, Fagawi weekend, fall in the same one, 4th of July, all those big weekends where we know there's going to be an increase of traffic, we'll obviously increase patrols. But we also do patrols for commercial fishing vessels, for example. We have a huge responsibility in enforcing the commercial fishing fleet. So we may decide to go out and do a 3-hour patrol just trying to, check commercial fishing vessels for safety requirements, for load requirements, what they're doing as far as bringing on load. So we have a lot of responsibilities in that aspect.
How many rescues, shall we say, or how many calls do you have to answer? I know you haven't been here in summer yet, but
right.
In the off season, how many times were you answering calls for one reason or another?
It really varied in the off season. It could vary because it could be a very, very important case, or it could be something that someone may have spotted a flare or what they thought was a flare, for example. So I would say in the off season, maybe 2 or 3 cases a month. That would be the extent of it. But in the summertime, we can run as many as 25 to 30 cases in 1 month, or 4 to 5 cases in just one weekend. And again, those will vary on extent of the actual case, but generally we stay pretty busy in the summer months.
And what sorts of cases do you come across?
Well, it could vary. It could be from a vessel taken on water. That's one of the things we see quite a bit of, especially with the commercial fishing fleet, where they'll have a seal rupture on their shafts. We had a vessel collide with the break wall a couple weeks back and took on water, so we were able to put a crew on board, do damage control, go down there, put wedges and plugs in to stop the water from coming in, and then tow them to safety. So, that could be one of our biggest issues. We could have a man overboard. We could have someone just swept off the jetties, or swept off the beach, and then end up doing search patterns for them. So, it can vary. A lot of times we see, stand-up paddle boards, for example. There's been a huge increase in paddle crafts, which include canoes, stand-up paddle boards, kayaks. Just last year, there were 28 deaths associated with stand-up paddle crafts, and most of those...
That's nationwide.
No, that was just in the Northeast.
Just in the Northeast?
Just in the Northeast.
Just in District 1?
Correct. Just in District 1, 28 deaths. So, the one thing we're trying to get out there, the message we're trying to send is please wear your life jackets. Out of all those cases, I believe 90% were from not wearing their PFDs, wearing a life jacket. So, the one thing we want to get out to them, when we stop boats in the harbor, just to do a routine safety inspection, the main thing we're looking for is life jackets. If they don't have a life jacket, we could terminate the vessel's voyage and send them back to the dock until they get life jackets.
Does that mean you're arresting them or just terminating the voyage?
No, we're just terminating the voyage. We'll give them paperwork. A lot of times that paperwork can be resolved just by them getting the right safety equipment. Mm-hmm. But we want to make sure that people aren't going out on the water without their PFDs. It's essential. It's probably one of the most important things they can do to keep themselves safe on the water.
I'm not sure how far your jurisdiction over things extends, but let's say you're in the harbor and some guy has flushed his tanks out into the harbor. Would you handle that, or would you tell the harbor master that, or both, or how does that get handled?
Correct. We'll usually generally let the harbor master know, but it is a federal violation of law to pump sewage overboard in federal waters. So that is something we can enforce. We may enforce it together, just depending on the circumstances of the case. But generally we will turn it over to our sector. They have what's called a prevention department there, and they'll usually issue a citation. Again, based on the circumstances.
I may have to get some help from you on terminology, but I believe there's something called a Coast Guard registered vessel, and there are non-Coast Guard registered vessels, privately owned. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes and no. So
what's the difference? What does all that mean?
Right. So you can actually have a registered vessel, which is usually registered through the state, not actually through the Coast Guard. And that's where you get a typical registration. You would have the Massachusetts numbers on the hull.
It'll say MS whatever.
Correct. Or you can have what's called a documented vessel. And if it's documented...
That must be what I'm talking about.
Right. It's a documented vessel. And the only requirements of the documented vessel is that you have to have a name on the stern, and then it's registered with the Coast Guard as being documented. So, there's variations on why you'd want to do one or the other, as far as, but it all depends on the owner, how they want to, title the vessel.
There are different costs involved, and
there are different costs involved, and there's different requirements for renewing that, and but generally it's just owner preference.
I'm sure insurance gets into it somehow too.
I really don't know. I'm not sure.
How long is your assignment here?
Right now I'm on a 4-year tour. I arrived a little bit late. Generally our transfers are in June or July. I was an off-season transfer, so I arrived the last week of September. So this summer I'll basically have done my 1 year, and I'll have 3 years left. But there's always a possibility of trying to get maybe another year or two out of it. Right now I have 25 years in the Coast Guard, and that'll take me to 28 years. You have to get out at 30. So
you have to get
out at 30.
Really?
30 is the maximum you can stay in the Coast Guard. So, hopefully I can maybe finish my last 2 years here, but we'll see what happens down the road.
Tell us what you've done for the last 25 years. Where have you been and what you've done?
For the last 25 years, I started my career on a ship in South Carolina. I did a lot of counter-narcotic patrols in the Caribbean, handled the Haitian and Cuban exodus. I left South Carolina. I went to Ohio. I'm from Cleveland, Ohio originally, so it was kind of nice to go back home for a little while, where my wife and I, which went to high school together, we got married. Then we went to Woods Hole. I went to a patrol boat in Woods Hole, so I came back to Massachusetts.
Now, do you get to choose these things?
Yes and no. You do have some say in it, but it all really depends. A lot of it's performance-based. A lot of it's, they used to call it a dream sheet, and sometimes that's all it was. It was just a dream sheet where you'd put a list in, and you may or may not get one of those picks on there. But I've been very fortunate throughout my career. I've usually ended up with one of my top 10 picks at least.
So you went to Woods Hole, and then what?
Then I went to Woods Hole. After I went to Woods Hole, I went back to Ohio. Oh, I'm sorry, I went to New Jersey after that. I went to Cape May, New Jersey, and went on another patrol boat in Cape May. Then after that, I went back to Ohio, which was actually kind of nice because it was one of the stations I grew up. I grew up on Lake Erie, so I was able to kind of go back to that station that really made me want to join the Coast Guard. The station I saw the patrol boats going out and rescuing people, so that was really nice. And then after I went there, I went back to Boston. I was on an ice breaking tug. That was my first command of an ice breaking tug, my first officer in charge job. And then after Boston, I went to California for 3 separate tours of 3 different commands afloat. So I commanded 3 different ships in San Diego, 2 in San Diego and 1 in Oxnard, California.
Where did the icebreaker take you?
Well, most of our we actually came to Nantucket once, but generally our ice breaking operations were in Boston Harbor. We would keep the harbor clear for the fuel barges to come in.
How much ice do you get in Boston Harbor? I'm a little surprised to hear this.
Believe it or not, the first year I was there in 2006, it wasn't a bad winter, but the following year in 2007, we were breaking ice continually throughout the harbor.
No kidding.
We also had to break ice behind Logan Airport. There's a basin behind the airport, and their concerns were that if a plane were to skid off the runway, they wanted to be able to get their rescue boats in.
Yeah.
So we had to keep that clear of ice for the rescue boats. But we also did a lot of aids to navigation too. That boat it had dual responsibilities. It was an icebreaker in the winter, and then in the summer we maintained buoys, we maintained day boards, we maintained a lot of aids to navigation.
So when you came to Nantucket, you had been, immediately before then, you had been in...
I was in California. I came from
California.
San Diego.
Okay. And where else in California were you?
I was
You
in
said-
Oxnard, California. It's about an hour and a half north of LA,
Okay.
around Ventura, California.
And was there a third?
Well, 2 in San Diego. So I did 2
Oh,
separate
two, I
patrol
see.
boats in
Okay,
San Diego.
two stints.
I was very fortunate. I was in charge of one of the patrol boats, and another master chief was in charge of the other patrol boat. And then when our tours were up after 3 years, we switched boats. So we were very, very fortunate to to stay there for 2 more years after that. And then this job came open, and I just saw a great opportunity to take over an outstanding unit. To get back to the East Coast. We had been on the West Coast for 8 years, and it was, we're from Cleveland, Ohio, which isn't exactly the East Coast, but we actually thought it would be easier to get home to Ohio, and finding out it's a little bit more difficult to just drive home.
Well, I've heard it referred to as the North Coast, where
North
Cleveland
Coast.
is, because of the Great Lakes all around that part of the country.
That's true. That is. That I've heard that too.
The station, the Brant Point station, those buildings were not always there. Tell us a little bit about the history of the station.
That's correct. So, and I want to say in 1948 or 1949, so there's 3 buildings on the station. The main building, that's our admin building where we work and where our galley is and our mess deck, that was originally the lightkeeper's house. You can see the lighthouse structure still on it.
Yep.
That was the main lighthouse keep. That was Brant Point Light. The other 2 buildings, their admin building and then our engineering building, were actually life-saving stations around the other side of the island. And in 1948, they brought those here by barge. They brought them around the island by barge, and now they are where they are.
That recently.
That recently. Yep.
I was on the internet, as we all are all the time, recently, and I came across a video that I believe you made yourself. Can you tell us about that?
Sure. Well, one of the things when I came out here to the island was I wanted to kind of give the people of Nantucket an idea of what we do. I wanted to, after talking to a lot of people, I realized that people knew we were here, but they didn't know exactly what we do, especially in the wintertime when they didn't really see us very often. And one of my goals was to create a Twitter page. So I created a Twitter, at Brant Point Coast Guard, if anyone wants to go on there and follow us. And through that, I'm able to video our training, to video what we're doing on a daily basis, what we're doing in the community, which is extremely important to me and a lot of my crew members down there. So I created that page to video what we're doing. And in the winter months, when we have heavy weather, and heavy weather is dictated anything over 10-foot seas and 30 knots of wind, we would go out and do heavy weather training with the motor lifeboats. So one of our training sessions in the middle of the Sound, we had about 10 to 15-foot seas, and we were working with one of Chatham's boats, and I was able to video it to show people exactly what we're up against out there, what we face if we have to do a rescue in those kind of seas. And those are actually calmer conditions than what we usually see outside the Sound, but it was a great way to show people, what our crews do every day, what they're up against, what dangers they face.
Well, those were big seas for Nantucket Sound. I know they can get bigger, but
Right.
that was the day I assume the ferries were not running.
I believe that is the case. They were not running.
And how large was that vessel and how many people were on it that day?
That's our 47-foot motor lifeboat, and we had a total of 7 people on the boat that day. We're constantly trying to get our people qualified and certified, so they have to do tows in that, they have to do man overboards in that. We use a dummy for a man overboard. We don't do live man overboards, but we use a dummy called Oscar for our man overboards, and we'll just go out there and generally train as long as we can. Those training sessions usually stop because people get sick. That's pretty common for a lot of the crew members to get sick. Because
Even for Coast Guard men and women.
even for Coast Guard men and women. The best thing about them is that they'll keep going. No matter how sick they get, they're going to keep doing their job, and they'll do it, and they're pretty good at it.
Well, this will obviously vary from winter to winter, but how often might you expect to go out there like that, and how long might you expect to be out there on a given day?
Sure. Again, it will vary from time to time. It could be once a month. It could be twice a month. I wouldn't say more than 3 times a month, but generally the only people that are operating out in those conditions in the winter months are the commercial fishing vessels. So generally those are who we see most get into trouble in those conditions because they have a livelihood to maintain. They're out there trying to make a living. So a lot of times they have to be out in that. And we encourage them not to. We want them to be on the docks, because we don't want to see them get in trouble. But there are times where they do get stuck in those conditions. So it could vary. A lot of times we could have a case south of the island for 20, 30 miles, which is still in our AOR or area responsibility. And if we have to go that far, obviously the 47 can't make good speed. We can make maybe 10, 12 knots. So that could, that case could run anywhere between 8 and 10 hours, depending. And when we do take that vessel in tow, we may only make 6 or 7 knots coming back.
Oh.
So it could take a long time.
Now, the station here does not have its own helicopter, but the Coast Guard does use helicopters. When do those come into use for Nantucket?
Okay. Well, we have an air station on Cape Cod, Joint Base Cape Cod, and the air station can be utilized different times depending on the circumstances of the case. For example, a person in the water, if we lose a swimmer, for example, they're going to launch a helo for that. If we run into a situation where we may not be able to get to a boat and they're taking on water, as I mentioned, if it's going to take 6, 7 hours for us to get to that boat and they're taking on water quickly, they'll launch a helo, and the helo will go out there and they can deploy a pump, they can deploy a rescue swimmer to the vessel to help them out immediately until we can get on scene and kind of stabilize things. But they're also used frequently in the winter months if life flight isn't flying to the hospital. Joint Base Cape Cod
I've
is
heard of that
routinely called,
happening, yeah.
where our helicopters will medevac someone off the island if need be.
So I'm not sure how to ask this question. The Coast Guard can do things that medevac or medflight cannot do. Talk about that, because that's something I think most people are not aware of.
Sure. Well, and I don't know the extent of the life flight, pilots' training, but our pilots are trained extensively to deal in several situations, the worst extreme conditions you can imagine. There are times where they won't fly, but those are very limited, So they're trained extensively on how to fly in terrible circumstances, to deploy a swimmer, hanging from the helicopter, with a mast swinging back and forth in 20-foot seas. That's what they do. So honestly, for them to medevac someone to just land here at the airport, pick them up and take them to an airport on Cape Cod, that's relatively easy for them.
This works from the base it's north of Woods Hole. It's about
Correct.
halfway between Woods Hole. It used to be called Otis
Used to be
Air
called
Force
Otis,
Base.
correct?
Yeah.
Which is where I actually lived when I was stationed in Woods Hole, because that's where most of the Coast Guard housing is.
So everybody from Woods Hole. What about the Chatham people? Do they live there as well?
No, not the Chatham people, just
Okay,
just the
too far
people
away.
in Woods Hole. A lot of people do live on the economy, but they can live in Coast Guard housing there.
You told me that there is public access to the station. You do give tours to the public.
That's correct, Charlie, and we encourage that.
You don't just want to show up, though. You want to give some advance notice?
No, a lot
or-
of times it's difficult depending on our operations, what we're actually doing. But I encourage people, if they really want to tour the station, that's something, I want to get out. I want the public to see what we do. It's really important to us that they see, what our job is, not only here on the island as far as the Coast Guard goes, but what we can do with the community. So, I always encourage them to give us a call down at the station, set up a tour, and please come down. We'll show them the boats, we'll show them the station, we can show them the communications center. And not only does it help for them to see what we're doing, but it also helps if they're a boater, because we can give them those tips. We can give them those, the certain pointers on how to be safer on the water. So that's really important to us.
With summer coming, is there any overall message you want to get across to the summer visitors here?
Be safe, obviously. Be safe, but there's several ways you can do that. Especially for the boaters. Always wear your life jacket. Make sure you have all the proper safety gear on board. File a float plan. A lot of people don't do that, but if you're going out and you're going somewhere, let someone know where you're going to be. Let someone know when you're going to be back. Let
Even if
someone
you're
know.
just going in the harbor on a
Right.
short trip, that you encourage people to let you know.
Absolutely.
Let the Coast Guard know.
Not the Coast Guard, but let someone at home know, for example. File a float plan with someone that they know. That way, if they don't show up at a certain time, it's really hard for us to maintain that. But if someone else, a spouse, a family member, a friend says, that's weird. They were supposed to be back at 6 o'clock at night. It's 10 o'clock, and they're not back yet. Now it's time to call the Coast Guard, so we can go try to look for them.
Master Chief Christopher Swiatek, thanks for joining me today. This has been fascinating, and I would encourage people to go down and have a look around with your assistance.
Thank you, Charlie. It's been a pleasure.
For Coastal Matters, I'm Charlie Walters. This is a monthly show that's a co-production of the Nantucket Coastal Conservancy and Nantucket Community Television Channel 18. Thanks for tuning in.